Hey guys, Dantixie back with a ton more Dragon Age Veilguard news. This video will cover Solas' status, breast, butt and bulge sliders, what makes your character special, companion factions, explaining why the demons look the way they do, the lighthouse, bookmarking combos, class differences, ballera, runes, companion customization, environmental abilities, loadouts, and the best of all, a look at the skill trees for each class. This is all from the Game Informer magazine and a 12-page article on the game. I picked it up and read it so you don't have to, and really there was a lot of reading and filtering through an ungodly amount of text. So if you like this kind of content and appreciate me destroying my eyes and sanity for you, clicking that like and subscribe button will help me bring you the good stuff. Let's start with the most exciting thing, the skill trees. I was going to cover this at the end, but I really don't want to do that to you. BioWare says, you won't find minutiae here, just real numbers. In other words, a new unlocked trait might increase damage by 25% against armor, but that's as in-depth as the numbers get. Passive abilities unlock jump attacks and guaranteed critical hit opportunities, while abilities add moves like Firewall and Spartan Kicks to your arsenal. As you spec out this skill tree, which is 100% bespoke to each class, you'll work closer to unlocking a specialization, which doesn't take reaching the max level of 50. Every class has 3 specializations, each with a unique ultimate ability. BioWare's philosophy with a skill tree is about changing the way you play, not the statistical minutiae. So each individual node you see is not just a 5% buff, you'll get a substantial increase to your effectiveness in particular areas, or a whole new way to play. So what are we looking at? The large circle is the class, diamonds are abilities, the medium circles are major passives and ability upgrades, small hexagons are traits, finally the small circle is minor passives and stat boosts. Here's the warrior skill tree zoomed out. You can see they get the specializations Champion, Reaper and Slayer. To reach the Slayer, for example, you can head down the weapons section or the abilities, or even snake around the outside of everything. Champion usually is a more team supportive specialization with a shield and one-hander, whereas a Reaper is more about risk reward and life stealing. Finally, the Slayer is a more traditional two-handed weapon class, as shown by what line you can take before reaching it. Slayer being abilities and weapons. It looks like it takes roughly 12 levels to reach the class specialization. That's if you want to count pips and make your way there with no detours. Though in that case, you'll only unlock 2 or 3 skills to use. The Rogue has the Duelist, the Saboteur, and the Veil Ranger. We saw that the Rogue has magically imbued abilities, most likely lore-wise by using runes in their weapons. Duelist might be your more traditional Rogue, whereas Veil Ranger might focus on range or magical abilities. Saboteur could focus around both as well as traps. Then we have the Mage. It has Death Caller, which is your Necromancer path, Invoker, which is your Elemental path, and Spellblade, which is your up-close and personal mage, which is why both it and Necromancer have a connection to Sustain. Zooming in on the tree, we see the ability Wall of Fire. It's a duration control-based spell that does 50 fire damage and has a 60-second cooldown, so quite long. In action-focused combat though, a wall of fire that continually burns enemies that walk through it could be invaluable. You also see Meteor to the left of Wall of Fire. Past a choice of 2 minor passives, a trait, another choice of minor passives, a major passive, and a choice of 2 more minor passives. Continuing on, if you completely ignore companions in combat, they will attack targets, use abilities, and defeat their enemies on their own. Companions are their own people. They have their own behaviors, they have their own autonomy on the battlefield. They'll pick their own targets. As their plots progress, they'll learn how to use their abilities more competently, and it really feels like you're fighting alongside these realized characters in battle. I see all the abilities Harding has, and I see everything that ballera is capable of, and sometimes I'm using vulnerabilities synergistically. Maybe I'm pausing or slowing time with ballera so that I can unleash devastating attacks with Harding, knocking down the enemy, and then me, as Rook, I'm rushing in and capitalizing on this setup that they've created for me. It's a game about creating this organic sense of teamwork. There are more explicit synergies with intentional combos where specific companions can play off each other, and you can queue up their abilities to do just that. That's what the pause and play combat wheel is for. So you may choose to build your character to really capitalize on particular companion abilities in order to get off huge combos, or vice versa. Or maybe you just want to do your own thing and never really plan out combos and work around vulnerabilities. It seems the game lets you choose how you approach combat in that regard. Also, when it comes to companions, it seems the more they grow, the better they'll get at using a particular skill, so I'm eager to see how that actually translates in combat. Game Informer says, I get the sense from watching Boosh play several hours of Veilguard that BioWare has designed a combat system that relies heavily on players extracting what they want. If you want to button mash and use your abilities freely when their cooldowns expire, you can probably progress fine, although on the game's easier difficulties. But if you want to strategize your combos, take advantage of elemental vulnerabilities, and min-max companions and Rook's loadouts, you can do that too, and I think you'll find Veilguard rewards that with a more enriching experience. Now back to the magazine, and I just want to clear the air for those afraid that Solas might be unjustly killed off before he has his due. John Epler says, Solas is still a central figure in it, he's still a significant character. This is direct confirmation that he is alive because the gameplay we saw was right at the beginning of the game, and he wouldn't be called a central and significant character if he was ended by elven gods right then and there. Also, there's something fairly significant that we need to talk about coming up soon that guarantees that he is alive. With that out of the way, let's talk about creating your character. It only took 3 videos, but we finally have confirmation that you can, in fact, modify the big 3 Bs. Your bulge, your butt, and your breasts. The game director says you can adjust physical characteristics like height, shoulder width, chest size, glute and bulge size, hip width, how bloodshot your eyes are, how crooked your nose is, and so much more. Oh, and there's nudity in Dragon Age Veilguard, which you learn customizing your character. So all those who really want to make something that stands out, you certainly can. Now, in terms of being special, it seems perhaps what makes you special is that you've decided to step up rather than being given some kind of magical MacGuffin. Rook is here because they choose to be, and that speaks to the kind of character that we've built. Someone needs to stop this, and Rook says, I guess that's me. However, later on in the article, they may have to eat their own delicious words. A few drops of Rook's blood interacted with the ritual, connecting you to the Fade forever. Solas is trapped in the Fade by our doing, and these gods are now free. It's up to Rook to stop them. So yes, Solas is confirmed most definitely alive in the game, and it also seems I was correct. You will get a Johnny Silverhand in your head like Cyberpunk, except it'll be Solas guarding you, reaching out from beyond the Fade, and they're both driven by ego in a way, so it's very similar. I guess Rook did step up, but there's also something there that makes him special and required to save the world. So I'm personally happy BioWare didn't step away from their own formula. Now, in terms of what that does for you, we don't know exactly, but we do know that yes, Solas will indeed play a massive narrative part in the game. We've already discussed in the previous video that you'll have a handful of faction backgrounds to choose from, and they'll affect your story in meaningful ways. But it's also confirmed that each of your companions will represent different factions. Davin is a Grey Warden and also an excellent monster hunter. Emmerich is a member of the Morn Watch and is a necromancer with a skeleton assistant named Manfred. Lucanus is a pragmatic assassin whose bloodline descends from the criminal house of the Antivan Crows. We also know that Ballera, a mage with a bow, is part of the Veiled Jumpers. Finally, Tash is a dragon hunter aligned with the Piratic Lords of Fortune. So no doubt you'll have bonus dialogue with a particular companion if you align yourself with their faction. We already saw that you had a bit of an extra greeting with Neve because your character was also a Shadow Dragon.
Nev, meet Rook. Both of you have done some work for the Shadow Dragons.
Isn't that a coincidence?
Some old friend said if I was working in Tevinter, the Shadow Dragons are worth trusting.
So if you know there's a character you already want to align with, maybe picking their background for your first playthrough might be the way to go. Note that there are 6 factions and 7 companions. It seems Harding fits within the Inquisition background which you don't have access to. BioWare used the character creator to make each in-world NPC, that's how detailed it is. So the girl that gets stopped by the Venatori at the start of the game, yeah, you can make a character like her. Your companions though, they've been handcrafted. A shame really, I would have loved to change their looks around. Would make each playthrough different and perhaps suit the tastes of different people because it seems most people aren't completely happy with the way these companions look. You can choose to play as a Canary or a Dwarf, but notably their size differs. It seems the camera adjusts to ensure larger characters loom over those below. On the flip side, the camera adjusts for Dwarfs to demonstrate their smaller stature compared to those around them. This kind of attention to detail impresses me, but here's another example. As you move further out from the city, it notably gets more and more elven. Dragon Age fans would know that it's because Minrathous is built on the bones of what was originally the home of the elves. One thing I most definitely didn't like was the change to how demons look. I appreciated them more as a tactile, physical representation, but BioWare have explained the change. They're creatures of feeling and live and die off their emotions around them. As such, they're just floating nervous systems pushed into this world from the Fade, rapidly assembled into bodies out of whatever scraps they find. Now, I understand this change, but it's still hard to swallow after 3 games without this interpretation. If it was them more rapidly assembling from scraps of corpses, for example, they would seem more demony rather than these colourful strings of energy. So we've already heard that the lighthouse will be your hub, where you rest, get quests, craft, and bang the ugly out of companions and their skeletons, but it turns out it's actually within the Fade. You wake up in the lair of the Dreadwolf himself, a special magical realm in the Fade called the Lighthouse. It's a towering structure centered amongst various floating islands. It also becomes more functional and homelier as you do. It seems a lot of thought and detail went into it. As it's Solas' home, you'll notice little details like a single plate with a fork and knife at the end of a massive table. Poor lonely egg. Since this place is in the Fade, it'll grow and change based on the state of the world. Since it's in chaos at the start, it will reflect that. Now when it comes to combat, players complete every swing in real time, with special care taken to animation swing through and cancelling. There's a dash and parry, the ability to charge moves, and a completely revamped healing system that allows you to use potions at your discretion by hitting right on the D-pad. You can combo attacks and even bookmark combos with a quick dash, which means you can pause a combo status with a dash to safety and continue the rest of the combo afterwards. It looks even cooler than it sounds. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by bookmarking combos, but I'm glad the mechanics are deeper than what we saw during the level 1 gameplay showcase. We got a look at the ability wheel, but they go on to explain more about it. In this screen, which essentially pauses the camera and pulls up a flashy combat wheel that highlights you and your companion's skills, you can choose abilities, queue them up, and strategize with synergies and combos, all the while targeting specific enemies. Do what you need here, let go of the combat wheel, and watch your sections play out. So if you want to enjoy tactical, slower paced combat, you can, issuing commands and queuing up actions. So bookmarking combos must mean queuing them up, but dodging in between the queue to avoid some damage, only for the queue to continue after, so dodging doesn't disrupt your queue. It seems there is some complexity here, as well as suiting both a more tactical and a more action-based player. BioWare continue. Each character will play the same, in that you execute light and heavy attacks with the same buttons, use abilities with the same buttons, and interact with the combo wheel in the same way, regardless of which class you select. But a sword and shield warrior can hip fire or aim their shield to throw it like Captain America, whereas our human mage uses that same button to throw out magical ranged attacks. Of course, the rogue uses the same button for their bow. The warrior can parry incoming attacks which stagger enemies, the rogue gets a larger parry window, our mage however can't parry at all. Instead, they throw up a shield that blocks incoming attacks automatically, so long as you have the mana to sustain it. So those are some pretty significant differences between classes. You'll be able to pick up and play each the same way, but a mage, for example, you might not use the light and heavy attacks at all until someone comes in range. You may just sit back and cast your magical range attack and abilities. When you need to block, you put up your magical shield, whereas the rogue might get in the fray more, parrying like crazy while the warrior blocks. Though a rogue and warrior can spec more into their ranged attacks and do the same, while a mage can spec more into its melee. There seems to be a lot of choice around how you build and play your character. We get a little bit more information about Ballera. As I mentioned, she's part of the Veil Jumpers faction, and she's the first recruitable companion since Neve and Harding join automatically. She's said to be bubbly, witty, and charming, though I think I'll be the judge of that myself. She's an academic and focuses more on electricity attacks, but she can use magic to heal you as well. They note that her electricity is effective against facing these sentinel enemies, since Neve has only ice magic. However, even if you don't have Ballera, we could equip a rune that converts ice magic for a brief duration into electricity to counter the sentinels, so you aren't locked into specific companions for specific enemies. It's unclear exactly how runes work, but they're either a consumable that gives us a short buff, or something more permanent that we put on our gear and activate for a short duration, which seems much more likely since the devs have already mentioned that we'll have a button to activate item abilities and it fits more within the lore. In terms of locations, yes, there are some whimsical areas that remind me of Fable, but the devs promise the game also has grim locations as well as grim story moments, because without the contrast, everything falls flat. Though I think people are just upset because the art style has shifted so dramatically, but honestly, the more I see it, the more I don't mind it. When talking about companion customization, BioWare says you can advance your bonds by helping companions on their own personal quests and by including them in your party for main quests. Every relationship level you rank up, shown by their character sheet, nets you a skill point to spend on them. The choices you make, what you say to your companions, how you help them, and more all matter in their development as characters and party members. And with 7 companions, there's plenty to customize, from bespoke gear to abilities and more. Though each companion has access to 5 abilities, you can only take 3 into combat, so it's important to strategize different combos and synergies with your party. Beyond this, each companion has issues, problems, and personal quests to complete. Ballera has her own story arc that runs parallel to and informs the story path you're on. There's a lot to unpack here, but it's confirmed that you can still gear up your companions, but they don't level up like you do. To make them stronger, you'll have to bond with them, which gives you a skill point for each rank. They have 5 skills to use, but most likely, like your skill tree, which I went through, you'll have a lot more choices with passives, which shape how the character plays. Companion quests now feed into your main quest and better inform it, rather than those quests being completely their own thing. Going back and playing Inquisition, you really only rotate 3 major skills anyway, and it was confirmed that we'll have ultimates and weapon skills, alongside different attacks, dodges, parries, ranged attacks, and well, weapon swapping, which I'll go through soon. So I think combat will be a lot better than it sounds. Game Informer constantly reminds us that they really enjoyed combat. So alongside companion customization and combat options, each companion seemingly has their own environmental ability. To reach the floating fortress, we must remove floating rock rings, and Ballera's unique ability, Tinker, can do just that by interacting with a piece of ancient elven technology nearby. Rook can acquire abilities like Tinker later to complete such tasks in instances where Ballera, for example, isn't in the party. So there will be Metroidvania style areas you might want to come back to later with the right party member, or when you've acquired the ability for yourself. I'm thinking Inquisition, where you could destroy magical barriers with a mage in your party, but would struggle if you didn't have one. Game Informer saw higher level gameplay as well, using Mage's arcane build-up to create an arcane bomb effect on an enemy, which does devastating damage after being hit by a heavy attack. Now she begins by channeling up a heavy attack on a magical staff, then switches to magical daggers in a second loadout, accessed with a quick tap of down on the D-pad to unleash some quick attacks, then back to the staff to charge it some more and unleash a heavy attack. This confirms that you can have loadouts, which means even more options in combat. I'm not sure why they haven't mentioned this from the start, as the ability to switch from magical daggers to a staff and back again completely changes the combat. Also, the fact that your charge carries over to switching weapons is intriguing. Not sure how it works exactly, but they start charging a staff, then switch to daggers to do light attacks, and then back to the staff to unleash their heavy attack to detonate the arcane bomb. I really want to see this in action. It means you'll be much more adaptable in combat. It's unclear if loadouts also switch out your loaded up skills, but I sure hope so. We've mentioned it before, but the game is most definitely not an open world. There will be large areas you can explore, but you'll be going from lighthouse through a gate to different biomes. Think Mass Effect more than Inquisition. This means it has more biomes and areas than any other Dragon Age before it, and also lets them be much more designed. I personally prefer this, as I didn't enjoy the open style of Inquisition. That being said, I still enjoyed the game, so don't at me in the comments. Speaking of, that's everything I have for you today. What do you think? More or less excited? Let me know below. Like always, if you want to appease to the gods, like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot and gives you some favor. For those who have stuck around, I really do appreciate you. Until next time, ciao friends.